The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things and does not compete. These words from the ancient Taoist sage Lao Tzu hold a secret that modern science is only beginning to understand. What if the path to peak performance isn't through force and struggle, but through something far more subtle? Something the ancient Taoists called Wu Wei. Are we burning ourselves out trying to force success when the answer lies in learning to flow? 2,500 years ago, a philosopher named Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, one of the most influential texts in human history. Within its pages lies a concept that directly parallels what psychologists today call flow state, that magical zone where athletes perform impossible feats, artists create masterpieces, and everything just clicks. But here's what's fascinating. Modern neuroscience is proving that these ancient Taoist principles weren't just philosophical ideals, they were practical instructions for accessing optimal human performance. The principle at the heart of this discovery, Wu Wei, literally meaning non-action or effortless action, and the implications for how we approach work, creativity, and life itself are profound. Wu Wei doesn't mean being passive or lazy. Think of it as acting in accordance with natural flow, rather than against it. When you're in Wu Wei, you're not forcing outcomes. You're responding spontaneously from a place of deep skill and intuitive wisdom. Picture a master chef moving through their kitchen. Each cut, each seasoning, each flip of the pan happens without conscious effort. They're not thinking about technique. They've transcended technique. This is Wu Wei in action. Modern psychology calls this flow state, complete absorption in an activity where self-consciousness dissolves and performance becomes effortless. Research shows that in flow states, the brain's default mode network quiets down, reducing self-critical thoughts and anxiety while enhancing focus and creativity. The conscious mind, with all its worry about past mistakes and future outcomes, steps aside. What remains is pure present moment awareness. To understand Wu Wei fully, we need to visit one of the most beautiful stories in Taoist literature, the parable of Cook Ting from Zhuangzi's writings. Cook Ting was butchering an ox for Lord Wenhui. His movements were so graceful, so perfectly coordinated, that it appeared he was performing a sacred dance. The knife moved through the ox without resistance, separating joints and sliding between bones with impossible precision. When Lord Wenhui expressed amazement, Cook Ting explained, "What I care about is the way, which goes beyond skill. When I first began cutting up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox. Now I go at it by spirit and don't look with my eyes." He had been using the same knife for 19 years, cutting up thousands of oxen, yet the blade remained sharp because he worked with the natural structure, never forcing his way through. This story reveals something crucial. Wu Wei emerges from deep practice and understanding. It's not about avoiding effort, it's about transcending the need to force. Lao Tzu repeatedly used water as the perfect metaphor for Wu Wei. Water doesn't fight, it yields. Yet it can carve through solid rock given time. It takes the shape of whatever contains it while maintaining its essential nature. When water encounters an obstacle, it doesn't bash against it repeatedly. It finds the path of least resistance, flows around, and continues on its way. Yet nothing on earth is softer than water, and nothing is better at overcoming the hard and strong. Think about the most effective people you know. Do they achieve through brute force, or do they seem to have an intuitive sense for when to push and when to yield? They've learned to read the natural rhythms of their environment and work with them, rather than against them. This isn't about being weak or passive. Water-like adaptability requires tremendous inner strength and awareness. It's active receptivity, being fully present and responsive to what the situation actually calls for. Modern neuroscience is revealing why Wu Wei and flow states are so powerful. When we're forcing and striving, the brain's default mode network, associated with self-referential thinking and rumination, is highly active. This creates internal resistance and anxiety. But in flow states, something remarkable happens. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-criticism and overthinking, downregulates. Meanwhile, areas associated with focused attention and embodied awareness become more active. Research shows that people who cultivate Wu Wei-like approaches experience reduced stress hormones, enhanced creativity, and improved learning. Their nervous systems become more flexible and resilient. They develop what psychologists call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt their behavior to match the demands of the situation. The ancient Taoists understood something we're rediscovering. Peak performance isn't about muscling through resistance. It's about dissolving the internal barriers that prevent our natural capabilities from expressing themselves. Studies of elite athletes reveal they perform best when they get out of their own way, trusting their training and allowing their bodies to respond spontaneously rather than trying to control every movement. The concept of yin and yang teaches us that Wu Wei isn't about constant softness, it's about dynamic balance. Sometimes the situation calls for assertive action, yang. Sometimes for receptive yielding, yin. Wisdom lies in sensing which is appropriate. This mirrors what neuroscience calls neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and reorganize based on experience. Just as yin and yang are constantly shifting to maintain harmony, our neural networks are constantly rewiring themselves based on how we engage with life. When we practice Wu Wei, we're literally training our brains to be more adaptive, more responsive, more capable of finding the optimal response to any given situation. Modern therapeutic approaches are beginning to incorporate these principles. Mindfulness-based therapies help people develop the present moment awareness that's essential for Wu Wei. Acceptance-based approaches teach us when to act and when to allow. How do we cultivate Wu Wei in our daily lives? Start by noticing when you're forcing. That feeling of pushing against resistance, of trying to control outcomes through sheer willpower, that's the opposite of Wu Wei. In those moments, pause. Ask yourself, what would water do here? In creativity, Wu Wei means creating space for inspiration rather than forcing it. Writers know that the best ideas often come not when they're straining to think of something clever, but when they're relaxed and receptive. In leadership, Wu Wei translates to responsive guidance rather than rigid control. The most effective leaders sense the natural direction of their team's energy and help channel it productively rather than imposing their will. In relationships, it means listening deeply and responding authentically rather than trying to manipulate outcomes. It's being fully present with what is rather than being caught up in what should be. In learning, Wu Wei involves embracing the natural rhythm of understanding. Sometimes you need to actively engage with material, sometimes you need to step back and let it integrate. Fighting your natural learning process creates unnecessary resistance. What makes Wu Wei profound isn't just its practical effectiveness, it's the deeper shift in how we relate to life itself. When we operate from Wu Wei, we stop seeing ourselves as separate from our environment, struggling against it. Instead, we become part of a larger flow. This shift dissolves what psychologists call ego rigidity, the tendency to protect our self-image at the expense of effective action. In Wu Wei, the ego becomes transparent. We act from our deepest wisdom rather than from fear or self-consciousness. Research on ego dissolution in meditative states shows reduced activity in brain networks associated with self-referential anxiety. People report feeling more connected, more creative, and more at peace.
The path of Wu Wei isn't about abandoning effort or ambition. It's about discovering a more intelligent way to engage with life, one that works with natural forces rather than against them. In a world that often glorifies grinding and forcing, Wu Wei offers something different, the possibility of effortless effectiveness. Not because we're trying less, but because we're trying more skillfully. As Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao does nothing, yet nothing is left undone." Perhaps it's time to discover what becomes possible when we learn to flow like water, soft enough to yield, persistent enough to transform mountains, and wise enough to know the difference. The ancient secret isn't really a secret at all. It's been flowing around us this whole time, waiting for us to stop fighting and start flowing.